It's 4 o'clock on a Monday, and you know what that means, don't you? It's time for another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live. Woohoo! And the crowd goes wild with today's special guest, Andrea Torchia. Yeah! All right. Welcome, everybody in the chat room. Welcome, Andrea. Great to have you on the show finally.
I know, right? How many years?
Yeah, I know. Andrea used to work at Taxi years ago, and I used to always say, come on, do a Taxi TV with me. And she was always afraid to do it for some reason. Probably didn't want to sit that close to me, but now we're separated by 10 miles and some wires. I also want to let you guys know we checked the tech out over the weekend. We were checking the tech out for the last half hour, and for some reason, Andrea's Wi-Fi, which has full bars, just keeps crapping out. So if it gets really bad, what we'll do is just put her on speakerphone, and we'll do it that way. But all that said, I want to let you know that I'm going to do a little bit of your bio first, because not everybody who's going to watch this show ultimately got the newsletter that went out or the email that went out. So when barely out of college, Andrea began working in A&R promotion and publicity at Chrysalis/EMI while learning the music publishing business. And then as creative manager at Rondor Music Publishing, she represented contemporary and classic catalogs, including the iconic songs of Jerry Goffin and Carole King. Wow, it doesn't get much better than that. And then as senior creative director at Zomba Music Publishing, she placed songs, connected writers and artists, and facilitated a roster with Britney Spears, the Backstreet Boys, Macy Gray, and Justin Timberlake. At Universal Music Publishing, she was named Senior Director of Creative, and she formulated relationships for Ron Nephew Feemster. How is Ron? Have you talked to him recently?
He's so good, yeah.
Great. And Harvey Mason Jr., who's a big damn deal in the industry, and Lamont Dozier, who is, Andrea is like family with him, and I adore him, having had him at the Road Rally, I think 2 or 3 times. Incredibly nice man and an amazing songwriter. And then her valuable industry experience led her to the appointment of Vice President of A&R for Taxi, where Andrea helped achieve multiple label, film and television, and commercial placements for the company Songwriters. Then she was tapped as Vice President of Creative with Razor and Time Music Publishing out of New York, although she was here on the West Coast. She worked with the company's multiple format catalogs while guiding creative input and fostering partnerships both domestically and internationally. Then, after that, she had 2 long-term consulting jobs with pop powerhouse Rock Mafia. You guys met them at the Road Rally, and that was thank you to Andrea for hooking me up with them. And then 1111 Music, is that how David called it? It was 1111?
Yeah.
Not 11111. 1111 Universal Music Publishing, a co-venture with 16-time Grammy winner David Foster. That preceded her tenure as VP with the U.S. division of the Japanese company Avex. Andrea exploited a diverse roster ranging from legendary Burt Bacharach to her signee, Tommy Brown, songwriter-producer Tommy Brown, whose #1 Billboard debuts included Thank You Next and Seven Rings for Ariana Grande, plus songs and productions for Juice WRLD, Meghan Trainor, and many others. It was at Avex that Andrea signed The Attire, sparking their transformation into the modern pop duo. And post-Avex, she continued the artist development process as co-founder and senior VP of Creative at Base Station Media. Welcome once again, Andrea. And the crowd goes wild. Anyway, I'm excited to have you on the show because I've known you well for, I don't know, gosh, it's been like 12 years or more, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
And I knew about Andrea for many years before that. We had a lot of friends in common, though we had never actually met face-to-face. Then we met each other, and I think I speak for both of us that it was the mutual fan club, like literally 5 minutes into the first meeting. And I was thrilled to have her come on board here. And I'm going to start by asking you the question I always ask virtually every guest, which is, did you grow up in a musical household?
Yes, I did.
All right. So with that, I want to mention the fact that, which was in the letter, in the email that went out. Where the hell did I put the list of all your Okay, well, her dad, I can't believe I printed that thing out and now I don't know where it is. Anyway, it's probably on my couch over there, 20 feet away. Andrea's dad is legendary record producer Denny Diante, who I think I told you this once. As a youngster, a 19, 20-year-old growing up in the industry, I mean, starting out at Criteria, I would read Recording Engineer Producer magazine. There were two people that I always looked at and admired their work and the people they got to work with. One was Michael Lloyd and the other one was your dad. So, yeah. And I was really thrilled. One year, Andrea got her dad, Denny, to come to the Road Rally and be on a panel. And he and I think maybe he walked out and went, God, that Lasco guy's an idiot. But I think we got along pretty well. Anyway, so who were some of the people that you got to meet and music you got to help your dad audition? Tell us about that whole thing growing up in that kind of household.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. I think especially because I was so into music. I was born loving music. My brothers were sort of more into like video games and movies, and I was always the music kid. So I spent a lot of time with my dad. He would bring demos home every week, and we put our headphones on and we would listen. And back then, a demo truly was like a piano vocal or guitar vocal, completely out of tune because there was no audio. But yeah, I mean, back then I met like Bill Withers and Paul Anka and Johnny Mathis and Barbra Streisand and Neil Diamond and Julio Iglesias and B.B. King and just Bobby Brown. Just there were so many of them. Henry Mancini. So I was lucky because I grew up, meeting and listening to some of the greatest, artists and songwriters, really.
I know that you, somewhere in your bio or somewhere online, and I already knew this anyway, that when you were a kid, like a fairly young kid, 9, 10, 11 years old, that, your dad would bring home a box of cassettes and you would sit there and listen to the stuff. And at some point you started, and I guess you learned this from your dad, some of it may have been intuitive, but you could say, well, the chorus doesn't pop enough or the song needs a bridge. Do you remember how old you were when it started to really sink in that there were good songs, there were great songs, and there were bad songs, when you could determine what was good versus great and what made something good versus great?
Absolutely. I mean, I grew up going to the studio with my dad, literally with like Barbies in the corner. And that's why I like to, spend my Saturday nights. So I think what I learned from my dad, I mean, there were so many things I learned, which was like song structure and, melody not strong enough in the chorus, or it took too long to get to a chorus. Right. The importance of a bridge. I sort of like, I've always been a stickler with that with my own writers. I think I learned so much about a song because demos back then didn't sound like records. So I heard the process from this sort of, bone skeletal, demo. And then hearing it, watching my dad go to the studio and hire musicians and put an artist on it and just hearing the evolution of a song. So it just taught me how to be able to hear the hit within the song and not so much focus on production. Unfortunately, the majority of the music business isn't, A&Rs are not like that, but
right.
He really taught me how to identify. And it's really, is it a verse somebody can relate to? Does it make them feel something? Can you sing the melody back, hours later? Does it make you feel something inside? Really.
How did that feel the first time your dad turned to you and said, "What do you think, Andrea?" I mean, did you like?
I was pretty damn opinionated, so he probably didn't even have to ask.
Yeah, well, but you are well known for having good taste, so there you go. Maybe some of it's genetic, other is environmental, but you've got it, and you certainly have a reputation. That's what I knew about you before I ever met you. And I think it was actually Shirelli that sealed the deal for me. Rob Shirelli is a good friend of Andrea's as well. And he said, "Do you know Andrea?" And I said, "We've never met, but we've got friends in common. I certainly know about her." And he said, "Damn, that girl's got good ears."
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, it's not even sexist either. It's like, wow, she's got awesome ears. did I mean? I would have been either blown away or jaded or something. I mean, not just like meet how you doing Barbra Streisand or Neil Diamond or people like that, but like be around them. When you're hanging out in the control room, even though you're over in the corner doing what you're doing, it's still, for most people, it would be breathtaking. That, like, I can't believe I'm in the same room with Barbra Streisand or Neil Diamond, and you were probably just like another day. Your dad could have been a dry cleaner,
Yeah, no, I think because it was just a part of my everyday life, and then my dad always, he didn't make a big deal about it. They're just people. Like, I even remember when my dad would be cutting vocals, he wouldn't actually let me in the studio.
Yeah.
Because he would say, like, well, he's pretty blunt, but he'd be like, it's like when you're like, taking a dump and someone's watching. So,
that's your dad.
But I guess what I got from that is that they're human too. They're people too. They have insecurities. They don't want to be judged. So that just happened to be their job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally get that. I'm hearing a little bit of voice feedback, and I'm not sure where that's coming from, but your phone is off, right? Your phone's off, my phone's off. So, all right, well, it's not so bad.
On it, like it's off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, were there times that you heard a song that you were, I'm just going to pull an age out. Let's say you're 14, 15, 16 years old. You'd been around this stuff for years. Were there ever times where you heard a song and went, "Dad, that one's a smash hit. That's a smash hit." And then it didn't get cut. Did you experience the high of, discovering something great and the low of watching it just end up in the dumper somewhere?
From when he was doing records?
Yeah.
Yeah, he had signed this duo, funny enough. They were called the Stabilizers. And, it's not a great movie, but they had amazing songs. So
Yeah.
I was surprised that they didn't take off the way they should have. Yeah.
And then as a professional, how many times in your life have you heard something that you would like fall on a sword for, walk into the president of the label or the publishing company and go, "This is a friggin' hit," and then it didn't get signed?
Oh, I've definitely pitched songs over and over again that I know are hits, and like I just could not get them cut. For sure, which is always heartbreaking, and it's normally because it didn't have a big enough name on the producer or on the writer. But there's still songs that I remember to this day that I could sing to you that I know are smash. I won't sing it for you, but that I know are smash.
In all the years we've known each other, I don't think you've ever sung, and I'm grateful for that. Actually, I don't know.
Be famous before I went into the business on the business side of things. I wanted to be a recording artist and have my dad produce me, but then I became an insecure teenager, so I said, forget it.
It's funny. I've had this conversation with Ken Calais about his daughter Colby, and she still to this day lets him produce her. And I said, "Really, that's not a problem?" It's like my daughters, like if they were making a record, not that they are, but if they were, they would like want me as far away as possible from that room. Where do you remember the first time that you were instrumental in getting a song cut or getting an artist signed, and the first time you heard it on the radio? Do you still remember like where you were and all that stuff?
It was a song for NSYNC.
Yeah.
And a bunch of the Germans came in from the label, and NSYNC they were just taking off. But funny enough, they were working on the next record, or they were looking for songs, and I had pitched this song to them, um, and they cut it, and it was in one of those meetings where you're at a round table, and it was one of my very first scary meetings, you know, and it was
Yeah.
like I love this song, and they loved it, and they cut it, and it actually went on some like big Pokemon soundtrack, and it was like in a movie. But that was my first kind of big cut. And then I had international first. I had like huge cuts with this like French artist named Ophélie Winter. So I sort of started doing, you know, those came first. But yeah, I always remember. But NSYNC was the first one I heard on the radio here, and I was crying. And
Were
then
you alone?
one on Kiss FM.
Were you alone in the car when it came on the radio?
No, I was with an ex-boyfriend.
Oh. So he was an ex-boyfriend and you were still in the car with him, or he was about to become an ex-boyfriend?
At the time, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Did
his
yeah.
Did his first name start with an M? I know exactly who you're talking about. Sorry, folks. We're going to keep that a secret. A little inside baseball. Anyway, yeah, I remember first thing I ever worked on that hit the radio was Firefall's You Are the Woman, and my parents had just picked me up from O'Hare Airport in Chicago, and we were in the car on Interstate 80 driving by the town of Joliet, Illinois, and You Are the Woman came on the radio, and I'm like freaking out. I worked on that. My parents like, what? So, huh? They didn't get it at all, and I felt so alone, like I had nobody there to share that moment with. Kind of a bummer. So I'm glad you were there with your boyfriend with the M, because I know, you know, he's an industry person, so he knows. Was there ever one that you went to bat for, a song that you went to bat for, and just like, come on, you got to cut this, you got to cut it, and they cut it, and it was a stiff, and you were like, oh my God, you had to do the walk of shame?
No, you know, I've never had a stiff of a song that I like loved and believed in, but I did sign a girl who wrote a song called If I Were a Boy when I was at Universal. BC Jean wrote a song called If I Were a Boy, and Beyonce cut the song. And right. It was amazing, but it did not blow up. Like they put it out and real quick went to something else. So it just didn't, I thought it was going to be this like huge radio smash. And it didn't, I don't think it had the moment it deserved, because I loved that song.
Remember, she was a Taxi member, and we all knew that something was going to happen for that girl, because she had all the right stuff. She had the work ethic, she had the talent, she had the right attitude, she was not a quitter. And then she wrote it with, who was Toby Gad? What was his name?
Toby Gad.
And I think the story was they were in a writing meeting in New York, and they went out of the apartment building, walking down the street to go grab some pizza or something. And she said, man, if I were a guy, if I were a boy, that would never happen. And they went ding, 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 ran right back up to the apartment, wrote the song. Did I get that right?
It's exactly true. I think either a guy was either like eating some big ass piece of pizza, and like, you know, all of the girls are always like, you know, trying to keep our weight down. And she's like, if I were a boy, I'd be able to, you know, I'd eat more pizzas. So yeah. But I loved that song. So
I gotta say, she did it at the Road Rally one year, and I honestly liked her version of it better than Beyonce's version.
Yeah, for sure. Like they think because it's her story.
And she brought a little grit to it, you know. It felt more honest and authentic with her doing it versus Beyonce was just a little too refined and polished or something. Yeah. Interesting. God, I'd forgotten about that song. Such a great song.
I love it.
All right. So you got your first job in the industry back at, what was it, Chrysalis EMI. You'd come out of training with your dad, and now you've got a job and you're working within the walls of the industry. Was it really hard to keep your mouth shut because you weren't at that level yet where people were going, so what do you think, Andrea? Were you like biting your lip till it was dripping blood down your chin?
You know, sometimes, but I worked for the A&R guy that I worked for was actually pretty inclusive. And he would, you know, I do it with my own children. I think it's really smart when you utilize the younger generation. Um, and so, I was this like young, girl. And plus he knew I had, been raised by an A&R guy. So he would actually, we would like listen to demos together, funny enough.
Wow.
Yeah, so I didn't really feel that way so much. And, I was I was not spoiled growing up, and I did all sorts of like I bagged groceries and I folded
Wow.
shirts and my parents were definitely one of like you're gonna work and I picked up the dog poop and I did a lot of the laundry. So I was I was sort of I was used to working my way, working towards something. And so starting at the bottom, I was just so happy to have a job. I mean, I pretty much made like no money. I had multiple roommates. But I felt so grateful to have a job that in an industry that I loved. I felt super lucky.
Um, yeah, knowing your dad, it's not like we're besties or anything, but I've spoken to him on the phone a couple times, hung out with him at the rally a little bit. He's definitely like you're going to work for what you get kind of guy. So I can't imagine he's like, here's my little princess. Let's buy you a Corvette for your 16th birthday.
I drove a Volvo Green station wagon. That's
Awesome.
my kids are far more spoiled. And I was like, I drove. They're like, that was in the olden days. I'm like, oh, no.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about how the job of a publisher has changed over time because I'm going to let you tell it. I'm not going to tell it and then say, am I right? But how has the job changed from...
I'm not interrupting you, but I'm interrupting you. My battery is dying at like a fast pace, so I'm going to
Oh,
plug
wow.
in on the floor,
Okay.
so everybody's really going to get to... Let me make sure it's charging. Yes. Hi! Now we're on the floor.
Hi. Perfect. I've got to say, 12 years of doing taxi TV, I've never had a guest on the floor before. Awesome.
Well, you had me. See? Sorry.
Well, it's good. It's a good thing you vacuumed.
Of battery. So, go ahead.
I'm afraid if you shut the door, we'll lose the Wi-Fi. So far, so good.
I know. It's fun. Yeah, we're good.
So how has the job of being a publisher or how has the publishing industry changed from when you first got into the industry to where it's at today?
I think when I first got into the industry, it was primarily pitching songs. Because I feel like there were a lot more opportunities to get songs cut by outside songs because it's almost like now artists are so aware of like publishing income. So now every artist is a writer as well. So I think it was, primarily pitching songs and yes, you set up co-writes. But I feel like it was mostly that was, the job. I feel like over the years, it's, it becomes a lot of my writers didn't even end up having managers because you almost take on the role of being a manager. There's a lot more development involved. There's a lot more guidance. It's really working on getting your songwriter with an artist or developing them as an artist. Like I have a lot more writers that are actually artists than before. Yeah. So I think it's just not this easy pitching anymore. Now it's like, do you have a social media account? Are you, working yourself on these horrible platforms like TikTok and Instagram? And so I just think it's a lot more now than I think it used to be. I have to work a lot harder now to get a cut. And I think my first year as a publisher, I had 36 cuts in my first year.
Wow.
Yeah, that was my
Did you say 36 cuts?
46 cuts, yeah.
I'm sorry, 46 or 36?
36.
Okay,
36.
that's still a ton. And am I remembering this correctly that about that time period, a writer would get signed to a staff writer deal typically, and the publishing company would go, okay, well, this writer, there were kind of two scenarios. One, you were an artist that got signed and they knew the record was likely to come out. And if you were also a writer, then, wow, we're going to make mechanicals, especially if they sell a lot of records. And they've got a label behind them pushing the songs to radio so we could make a lot of performance money, blah, blah, blah. And the other way was that you were just a plain songwriter, purely a songwriter, and you impressed the people at the publishing company. Somebody like you in the creative department would go to bat for that writer, convince the president of the publishing company or maybe the VP who is above you, we need to sign this writer. They say yes. And then, if I remember, they were obligated for like 12 songs that they wrote solo a year, and they had to meet with your approval. Like, yes, we'll count this as one of your 12.
You get like a minimum delivery requirement, commitment. You had a minimum like release commitment. The deals back then were like terrible, really.
And what were some typical advances for a writer when they signed? You know, not somebody who came with a pedigree, but somebody who was like new at the game, but really, really good, and the publishing company wanted him or her. You know, was the money decent, at least enough to keep them alive while they were writing?
It depends. I mean, if they had like no pipeline, you maybe like. I saw some as. I mean, it also depended upon the company, but I saw some as low as like 30,000, maybe 50,000. Then of course they would be higher if they were more established. It's interesting.
Right, like if they'd had a previous cut with somebody.
It was like less money, and then publishing deals got like really kind of big and made no sense, which still happens sometimes now when there's a lot of like competition. When multiple companies are interested, then you're just like stupid paying money that doesn't make any sense. But yeah, so they used to be far smaller, but I think that a writer was able to make more money back then too, because there were more opportunities to get cuts.
And there weren't 5 or 6 other writers on the song.
Oh yeah, that's my least favorite. Is when there's like 12 writers on a song. Like, thanks for my %.
I don't know if I knew you back then, but I remember going to the ASCAP Awards one year, I think with Ralph Murphy and my wife Deborah, and I was astonished. I knew this is the way it was, but I was still astonished. Every time somebody won an award, there'd be like 6 to 10 people on the stage. And all I could think of is, because I'm a business guy, all I could think of is, how much is 12% of that? If the publisher's getting half of the publisher's share, if it's a co-pub deal, and they're making 12% each of just half of the publisher's share, unless you have a mega hit, you're not going to make enough money to live next year.
Yeah, I think there was a time when, like, before all the streaming, when there was physical copies, you're making more money, better money. But yeah, I mean, especially now, it's really sad because you see writers that even if they have a decent percentage of a copy, it takes a long time to make money. To royalties to make anything worth anything at this point. It's rough. I feel for the writer and producer and artist of today.
Are there still staff writer deals out there for somebody who doesn't come with any sort of pedigree or connection or anything in the pipeline? If you were at our house for a barbecue this weekend and somebody walked up and said, "Oh, my daughter's a songwriter," and I bet that's never happened before, and they handed you a CD or thumb drive and you listened to it in the car on the way home, which I'm sure would be your first order of priority, and you just like were, "Holy crap, this is amazing. This kid is a gifted writer." Can you walk that person into a publishing company and still get them a deal today?
I can.
I know you can. In general, can.
Yeah, no. If you find an advocate.
Yeah.
Like even like the attire. I mean, when I signed them, they had buzz going on, but they don't have one cut. Their demos were demos. I mean, they didn't even have an Instagram, I don't think, at the time when I signed them. So. But I was like, holy shit balls, like, this is amazing. Oh, am I allowed to crash the car? Now
you are. It's okay.
So yeah, for me, that doesn't matter. For me, it's if someone's amazing, I don't really care. And there are those of us out there still. Not as many that are, as they want to take the risk, because it's a lot easier to sign an artist or a producer or a writer that has a lot of activity, and if they don't do well, you could say, well, I mean, look, they had all this coming in, than to say, I took a shot on somebody that had nothing. But everybody had nothing at some point.
You're absolutely right. And by the way, thank you for hooking me up with Greg, whose last name is Schilling. Now, I kept calling him Schiller on the show, but Andrea introduced us to him here at Taxi and suggested that he might be a good guest, and he was a great guest. He's charming, articulate, great work ethic. I mean, he's a package. He really is. He deserves everything that you saw in him that hopefully will bring him fame and fortune.
It will. Trust you me. Yeah.
Let's see. Reading my own question here so I can understand it better. I guess this is part and parcel to what we just talked about, but I get asked this question all the time by Taxi members and other people that I meet. Can somebody still write a song like an acoustic guitar vocal demo or a piano vocal demo? Is there any hope of getting that cut, or do you need a demo that's damn near a record?
If your lyric and your melody are so strong and your vocal, if you are off key, then just don't even bother. But if what you've got is top notch, and that is a guitar, piano, vocal, but if your lyric and your melody and your vocal are strong, then yes.
I like that.
Than a poorly dated, produced track, to be very honest with you.
We hear a lot of that. We'll talk about that. I think I wrote a question about that. Let's talk about the vocal for a minute. I get that follow-up question fairly frequently. It's like, well, why does my vocal matter? They know it's a demo. It's not like they're going to put it on TV or put it out as a record. And my answer is because you've got to sell it. Your job is to make them just be cringing that they want to cut this song. I love it. I love it. And hopefully that happens before you're even done with the first chorus. I'm not nuts, right?
No, you're 100% correct. You want to, it's like if you will go to watch a movie and the acting is terrible. You know, I mean, it doesn't matter if the storyline is good. It's like, oh my God, this acting is freaking awful. Or you can't hear the acting, you know? So yeah, you have to, your vocal has to be on point. Even if you're not Mariah Carey, you still have to, you know, be on key, your pitch, you know, you can't, I mean, I've heard demos that they're painful to listen to. So that's not the way to go.
Writer camps. I mean, maybe there are other terms for it, but I know it as a writer camp. It seems like virtually everything that gets cut, at least the vast majority, comes out of a camp. Can you tell our viewers what a camp is, how maybe camps get formed? Can you be in multiple camps as a writer or a producer, or is it just like, I know this guy, I know that girl, I know this artist, and you can be in multiples? Can you talk about camps?
So when you say a writer camp, because a lot what I'm thinking when you say writer camp, like, oh, there's a BB Rex, a writer camp, like right. A writing. Like, are you talking about a writing camp for a specific artist project, or just like two producers and a topliner that have called themselves now a camp and they write everything together? It
can go both ways. So make the distinction. Explain them both, which you just did.
A writing camp is basically like there's one that's being put together right now by this marketing company, which is interesting. But it's normally when we hear that an artist is looking for songs to record for their next album, and it's usually when they're down to the wire and they don't have the single.
Right.
So that's usually when like a BMG or a Universal or a Pulse or whoever just says, hey, let's put together a writing camp and let's just get a bunch of our writers to write a song, multiple songs, and just like see if any of them work for, fill in the blank, BB Rexa. And then they go and they pitch it to the A&R. A lot of times you will get the label involved and say, hey, so-and-so, we're putting a writing camp together. What are you specifically looking for? A lot of the times there's a whole bunch of songs written that nothing happens with. But every now and again something does, but sometimes it's an exercise in futility. But if there's ever a writing camp that you're asked to participate in, I think it's a good idea.
Do they ever invite the artist that they're writing for into the camp because they get some buy-in by the artist who feels like they've been a part of the process, so it ups the shot of that song getting cut?
Sometimes that does actually happen. And those are the better ones to be involved in. But usually those are for the top tier producer writers that are probably already getting cuts on those albums anyway. And then the writing camps, that's usually just if, a couple topliners and a producer, or a couple producers and a topliner, they write together a few times and they just have a really good synergy and chemistry. So they give themselves a name and they become, I wish I could think of one right now. I don't see that quite as much. I don't see that quite as much, but it's still, sort of a thing. But I like to put my writers with all sorts of different producers, and like even, the attire, even though they can write 100% of a song, I still think it's cool to, like, I've just set them up on a bunch of co-writes with other producers because I think it's good just to, see what else they can come up with, because you get inspiration from other people. So sometimes I don't think it's necessary to write with the same people all the time.
So, as a publisher, if you've signed a writer, let's take Gregory Schilling as an example of this. I would imagine that you meet with him fairly regularly. You listen to what he's got. You hear stuff that's in very raw state to maybe medium developed. You give some feedback, and you might be inspired to say, "Oh, this would be good. You know what? You could take this to the next level if you wrote with somebody that I've known for a few years, I think would be a good match for you." You put them together, they get together and write. What happens if it doesn't gel, and now you've got a song that started out as just Greg Schilling, and then John Doe is also added to it as a writer, but now Greg wants to take it back, strip it back to the way he had it so that he could finish it on his own, or maybe co-write with other people.
Right.
What happens to the version that was written with that first person you matched him up with? Is it just
goes bye-bye?
Okay.
Depends. If Greg comes in with, say like a first verse and a hook, but there needs to be, if he comes in with almost a finished song, and I just put him with a producer who just puts a track underneath it, then it's like, you take your track, we're going to take our top line, and let's go our separate ways. If it just so happened that producer maybe helped inspire part of a second verse or a bridge, and you could say, okay, you take your track, but you helped inspire my bridge, so I'm going to give you, 7% of the publishing of the song. So, you have to share if somebody did help, inspire, you in some way, or help co-write a portion of the top line. But if it's literally like you did the track and I did the lyric melody and I'm not using the track, then you just take it and move on.
It's interesting that you threw out 7%, because one of the questions that we get a lot at Taxi is, how do we divvy up co-writes? And our answer is generally, if there are three people in the room, it's a three-way, unless there's an extenuating circumstance, and you just gave us a great example of what one would be. So what happens if you say to the person who largely inspired the bridge, which is making a great contribution to the song, you know what, I feel like you should get something, so I'm going to give you 7% on this, and they go, no, I want more. What happens then?
Well, what's great, what I would say in that case, Greg would probably already have in his voice notes or somewhere that had, what he came in with. So there would be, between publishers, there would be a discussion. And if that person wouldn't back down, then, someone like Greg could say, okay, I'm just going to totally rewrite that bridge. And now you get nothing. And a lot of the times, exactly. A lot of times if that's the case, then they'll be like, okay, I'll take the, 7%.
Right. Better to have 7% of something than nothing of nothing.
That siren on your end or mine?
It's out in the parking lot here.
My dog's bark. Sorry.
Wow. They can hear it? Amazing. Yeah, there's some guy that's got a, like classic Los Angeles dude with a Porsche convertible that parks beneath my office window. And no matter when I do taxi TV or an important Zoom meeting, he always picks that time to fire up the car and sit there and start answering texts while the car is idling below me. Anyway, okay, so used to be back in the olden days that if you set up a couple of writers to write together, that they generally would meet at one person's house or another, or maybe they'd even go to a writing room at the publishing company or something, maybe even a Starbucks, who the hell knows, but they would be face to face. And then as Zoom became a thing, it became more, collaborative via wire, and then COVID came along, which forced everybody to do it in a Zoom state. I'm getting that it really hasn't hurt the energy much. The people I know that are writers say, yeah, it's working out pretty well. What do you hear on the street from your people as far as them working on Zoom or whatever?
I think that everybody has learned to adapt. Nobody totally liked it at first. Right. I think if it's somebody you've already written with before and you already have a connection with them, then it's not the biggest deal in the world. I think sometimes it takes a little bit longer to get it going creatively when you're hi, meeting over Zoom, you're right. Writing over Zoom.
Can I offer you a drink?
Exactly. But I think that, writers are starting to adapt. But at the same time, I also know I hear from a lot of writers and producers I'm doing in person again. So I
wow.
think it's first choice, unless they're completely freaked out over, the virus. But, I think it's a lot of writers have worked together, East Coast, West Coast, for years now. So it's been being done. But I think that if a writer has a choice, the creative energy in the room is always the first choice. Even for me, I prefer in-person meetings. It was very interesting signing an artist to a record label when I truly haven't even met anybody in person. It's super weird. Yeah, everything has been on FaceTime or Zoom or whatever.
I'm going to give a shameless plug to a company that I'm pretty sure is going to be a sponsor at this year's Road Rally, and it's called Session Wire, and it is built specifically for musicians to collaborate in real time with no delay, with super high quality video and CD quality audio. Some engineers and mixers are starting to use it where they're doing a mix session with their clients sitting with a pair of NS10s 1,000 miles away, listening to the mix in real time as it happens. So if those of you watching the show, or Andrea, any of your writers want a better way to do a Zoom thing, but just better, sessionwire.com. It's very, very cool. I'm not thoroughly versed in it yet, but when we spoke a week ago, I went and spent an hour on the website and went, wow, this is the real deal. So,
cool.
Yeah. Okay, so now you've got a new writer. Let's say we've got somebody who's been paying attention. They've been working on their craft for years. They didn't think they came out of their mommy's tummy, born a genius. They realize that it's a craft, it's an art, and it takes a lot of work. And they've gotten there. They're at the point where, I know you well enough that anytime I would send you something and say, I'm sending you something, I wouldn't burn a bridge by abusing that privilege or friendship. And you hear them, they got there through a connection in a relationship. What if they don't have that? What if they're in, Peoria, Illinois, and they've got those chops? How do they get noticed?
Is this for an artist?
For a writer or an artist.
Well, I think as much as I, don't like social media, I think that I would say market the hell out of yourself, whether you're a writer, whether you're a producer. On TikTok, there's producer talk, there's songwriter talk, a lot of artists are kind of blowing themselves up on that platform And it's like the Wild Wild West. Makes no sense why some of these things go crazy and some don't. But I think between like you can release stuff independently, for almost nothing. I think it's SoundCloud, it's TikTok, it's all those things. I just say you have to really market the hell out of yourself, because I see what we have to go through having an artist with friggin' hit songs and a label and money. It's not easy. It's because I don't remember how many songs are released a week, but it's frightening.
Yeah.
How many there are now, and that's the ones that are being released, through labels, and then you have all these independent things going. So I would just say you really have to market yourself
Which,
constantly.
I hear a lot of people go, look, I don't want to do the business stuff. I'm a creative. And they're dooming themselves to failure because, on one hand, the internet gives you all these options. And if you're willing, well, you know what? At the time when, I was probably ahead of you by a decade growing up in the industry, as it were. There was always that 1 or 2% factor. The people who really worked on their songcraft, really worked on playing clubs. Then they would do concentric circles. First, every club within 10 miles, and they would play it at least once a month. Then every club within 50 miles, play it at least once a month. And then going to the town that the club was in the day before and putting up posters on telephone poles, calling local radio, doing interviews, doing anything they could to saturate that market. And eventually, because all A&R people said, if you're doing the right stuff, I'll hear about you. And that was pretty true. And it's the same thing now. It's that same 1% that are willing to work that hard using social media that will break through. And the other 99% are going, I don't understand. I set up an Instagram account. I set up a TikTok account. I post something on there like at least once a day. and they wonder why the world hasn't discovered them.
It's multiple posts daily. It's like what I've always told my writers, my artists, like it's the music business, but it's the business of music. So you have to. It's not just sitting in your studio and writing songs for you and your mom and your sisters and your best friends to hear. So you have to. That's the writing the songs. If you're gifted and a naturally creative person, that's like the easy, warm and fuzzy part. But it's like what you do after that. Otherwise, you're going to have thousands of really great songs that nobody's going to hear.
Yeah, I heard a number, crazy number, like I could be totally wrong, but I want to say 210,000 songs, new songs get uploaded to one form of social media somewhere in the internet a day. Globally.
It's some crazy number. That's why I'm like, you've got to really just live and breathe and eat and this life, because that's why when I get these like young starry-eyed kids that are like, I want to be a songwriter, I want to be an artist or a producer. I'm like, oh God. And I understand that when it's your calling and when you're meant to do this, you're meant to do this. But it's rough. It can be very rough. But no, if you go and watch any like behind the musics or read any books, very, very, I don't know if there's one artist, any legendary artist or successful artist, band, whatever, that it was like this,
Right.
They all like had deals that, the labels like dropped them and then single, so there's a long, windy, bumpy, curvy road to success. It doesn't, otherwise you're a one-hit wonder. So I would rather the long, curvy, bumpy, somewhat hard road for success than just to have one hit.
Yeah, you're also prepping yourself because when that first hit does take off, if you're lucky enough to have that happen, then you've got to have the sophomore release. And that's harder because you're probably out touring to support the record under normal circumstances. And the pressure's on. You get 10 years to write your first song and then, 10 weeks to write your next hit.
It's true. That's why I don't stop writing either. Like I know for the attire, we've got as much as, we have album 1 pretty much done, we also have almost half of album 2, 3/4 of album 2 done.
Wow.
But they'll continue to write. I always am like, I didn't sign you because I think you already wrote your best songs. Keep going.
I was shocked to find out, I'm not going to say where he lives or where I live, but I was shocked to find out Greg and I live very close to each other. It's kind of in the middle between the two of us.
I know.
Speaking of which, there's a young girl, you probably know who she is. I won't mention her name, but she was the one time a friend of a friend of a friend, and she was growing up in our general neck of the woods, probably within a 2-mile circumference or radius of our house. And her mom knew a friend of my wife or something, and they got to me and can we bring her into the office? She writes great songs. I almost fell out of my chair. This kid wrote great songs, and she was about 14 or 15 years old. And she had the total work ethic. She worked out all day. She was skipping school to stay home and write songs. She did live it, breathe it, and you know what it. And she eventually did get noticed by somebody somewhere. She did get a development deal, and then I think she signed a deal and was writing with big writers. And with all that, nothing ever happened. It didn't take off, and it broke my heart because she did everything right. If there was anybody who deserved it because she worked for it, and I think she's still signed and still working on it. But
maybe she just doesn't have her moment yet.
Yeah, I hope that's the case.
Alicia Keys had like multiple record deals, and they kept going back and having her, write songs and write songs and write songs. And the first single she ever put out was the single she was first signed on. So I mean, that was Fallen. So like, maybe she just hasn't had her moment yet, because it's all in the timing when it's meant to be. I think
Yeah.
Even like the guys having like I don't know, 2 or 3 deals before this one. But and that one deal didn't work out, then the label folded, and now they have this one. So I think it's it's meant to be when it's meant to be. And for some people, maybe like that just as much as you want, that maybe that's just not your calling. So there was something else for her to do. Who knows? But
I remember. Sorry, say it again. I stepped on you.
It doesn't. Sometimes there's a lot of sad stories. Like
that. There was a period years ago at Taxi where Doug Minnick and I and my then partner in the company managed an act for a while because they couldn't find. They got signed to a major label. It was MCA Records, and what was his name? Mitch at MCA, A&R guy. Anyway, I remember he drove a green Defender 90, Land Rover Defender 90. I loved his car. It was a true classic. Anyway, Mitch Brody, you probably remember him. So he was passionate about this band. He did all the right stuff as an A&R guy internally at the label to get all the departments excited. And then the label fired the head of radio promotion, and they brought in a lady who was brand new to the company, and the first thing out of her mouth was, "I hate this band." And that was it. It was over. They would literally, it was looking really, really good. They were breaking right about the same time, or got released right about the same time as Blink-182. We would always run into them as we were going into the president's office. They were coming out. Just a change in staff literally killed their career in a minute.
Oh, yeah, I know. There's so many of those stories, and they're tragic, truly, because that is somebody's dream that just got crushed.
Especially hurts when they really truly deserve it because they did the homework, So are yesterday's guitar, vocal, piano, vocal songwriters, demo makers, are they topliners today? Is a topliner just them, basically?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say that, because that's really what the topliner is, the lyric and the melody. So. Yep. Yeah.
Do you have any sense who's in bigger demand, or which discipline is in bigger demand? Topliners versus track makers?
Topliners.
Interesting.
Always. There's so many producers.
Yeah.
Yeah, because not taking away from, the talent of producers, because I know producers that they're good and maybe they can get a song to like a B plus, and then there's producers that they just there's magic that they put into that track and they have vision. So producers are incredibly important. I'm not saying that they're not, but it is much harder to find somebody who can write a killer lyric and melody.
Yeah.
Because that drives the song,
There's magic in that. And speaking of magic, my first year, I'm sure I told you this story when you worked here, but my first year of working in the actual industry, I was an assistant engineer at Criteria Studios, and very early in my tenure there, I ran into Barry Gibb. We all knew each other because we'd see each other, eating pizza in the lounges or crossing in the hallways, or maybe I'd be cleaning a toilet while he was standing at the urinal, whatever. Barry Gibb knew who I was. And I passed him in the hallway one day and I said, "Excuse me, Barry, what does it take to write a hit song?" And he looked at me with this quizzical look on his face, like, "You don't know this yet, you moron." And he just looked at me and he said, "Emotion, mate," and just walked away. And I went, wow, that's really deep. So he was right, of course, but I think a lot of songwriters who are early in their careers confuse emotion with emotional. They write very personal songs about their own story, which I understand, or their own source of pain or fear or confusion or longing or whatever. Songs, and I'm not saying these are rookies. These are obviously not rookies, but people like Adele, Billie Eilish, Olivia Rodrigo, kind of big emotional ballad types of songs. Yet my own personal observation is that there might be more hits that make it to radio and Spotify playlists that are beat-driven, up-tempo songs that are often filled with an attitude. If they're by a female, it's probably a sense of like female empowerment. I don't need you anymore, my boyfriend, or it's girls' night out, or whatever the topic is. Do you have any sense, maybe you know statistics, maybe it's just a visceral observation, that are you better off as a songwriter concentrating on writing the emotional ballad that really tugs at the heartstrings, or should people concentrate more on great melody with lots of butt-bumping beats in there or something? I don't know.
Okay, well, I can tell you what I tell my straight-up writer-producers.
Okay.
I always say go for the mid-tempo or the up-tempo, because that's 10 out of 10 times what an A&R person is looking for. Because ballads, being that they're very personal, and they're a little bit easier for songwriters to write. So a lot of the times the ballads come from the artist. And for a ballad to be a radio single, I mean, ballads can be huge radio singles. I mean,
right.
Absolutely, we both know that. But I think that because they tend to be more personal, as a writer, you wouldn't really know you couldn't put those specifics in there for an artist to write. I mean, like, look at Diane Warren's done it a million times, but that's Diane Warren. So that's what I always tell my writers if they're writing for an outside, if they want to get cut. So it's like, look, if you've got a ballad that is just amazing and it's so relatable, everybody who hears it wants to cry, then of course I would 100% pitch it. But I just have found as a publisher, when pitching, and I work with the labels and management, they already have the ballads because they're written by the artist. So I always say go for those mid-tempos and up-tempos because they're harder to write, really, I think. I
have a good friend who's a hit songwriter, you know her, Cara Diaguardi, and she once described a writing session where the label sent over like a 15-year-old girl who was the artist. And Cara it can be very gracious in those situations. She said, "So, what would you like to write about today?" And she goes, "My dog." And she had her dog in a little Gucci bag, "Can we write about my dog?" And Cara, I'm sure, was like biting her lip, gritting her teeth, and probably turned the dog into an ex-boyfriend and then wrote a song about it. I would imagine that that takes a whole other layer or level of craft to be able to take somebody else's vision, as bad as it may be, and then turn,
Very
yeah, turn that pile of steaming crap into something amazing. It's like,
oh,
wow.
that's real good. Yeah, you have to be really good at that. But, yeah,
Love the dog.
so she could do that. But that's hard. That's also what's hard when these. There was a very strange period of time where all these like little young artists were getting signed, and that's
Right.
exactly what they don't have. They don't have life experience to really be. It was hard to write it other than about their dog or their friends and
My my parents suck. My boyfriend is awesome, or he broke my heart, and my dog is my best friend. I get it.
Exactly.
All right. So you have said, I don't know, 100 times in the years I've known you, dude, it always starts with a great song. And you and I agree. Everybody in the industry agrees on that. But you need a great artist to sell it. I have heard great songs, like as you mentioned before, with a lackluster vocal that just undersold it, and it does make a difference. What does it take? What are the qualities that make a great artist?
Will make a great artist.
Yeah.
I think authenticity, confidence, not arrogance, confidence, and identity, knowing who you are as an artist. It's not enough if you're pretty and you can sing. You need to know who you are, what you stand for, what's your mission. Of course, you need to be able to sing. But even there's some, but there's even some singers that aren't like amazing singers, but they just have a vibe and an energy, and they walk in the room and you're like, oh shit, that's a star right there.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, like, it's not always about the way you look. So there's a lot of really beautiful looking people. So it needs to be more than that. And there's a lot of beautiful people that can sing. So it's really about, even when I signed the attire, it's like, well, who are you guys? What do you stand for? Who is the attire? I think it's really important knowing who you are.
You're right. There are a lot of I really haven't ever had that thought. They're almost a dime a dozen, especially in this town or any of the music centers. So, yeah, what is that thing that makes you that extra 5% better? And you're right. It's uniqueness, because there are a lot of beautiful people who can sing.
Exactly.
Wow.
I've seen them all the time. I've seen them come and go.
So it used to be that A&R people were the geniuses that paired a great song with a great artist. And now it seems like publishers and even to some extent managers are kind of all in the mix. Everybody's on the team now making that happen, whether it's bringing in the right producer to build the track, or a lot of times something that didn't exist back when I was on that side of the glass was that vocal producers. Like, I know Kara does a lot of vocal production, somebody that just knows how to get a vocal delivery out of a great vocalist, taking them to a level. Remember my friend Marshall Altman? I don't know if you...
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so Marshall always said at the Road Rally every year, the floor is bad, the ceiling is great. Or no, the floor is bad, the ceiling is good of the ballroom, and the sun is great. A vocal producer can take an artist's vocal performance to the sun. That's a talent. That's a gift. So how does that affect you as a publisher who's always been like directly involved? You're right in there with all these people now feeling like they've got a piece of the action for putting stuff into the pot, stirring it up, and making that magic. Does it get more complicated? Does it get weird? Like, who was the genius that put that song with that artist together? Is it harder?
Not really. I mean, I was just actually talking to a manager today who manages artists that, they've had a lot of success, but the publishing's available, and they're changing like record labels, and we were just having that conversation where it takes a village. Like it's even as a manager, I need help from the other publishers. I need help from the label, So I actually think it's a benefit And the greatest thing is when you do have a team, the manager. The worst is when you're the only one and nobody else does anything. You know, it's like, oh,
But they will take the credit in the end after you do all the heavy lifting.
oh yeah. And what is it that they say? Success has many fathers. Like failure has, none or maybe one.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, I have been. It's very funny because even just one of my bigger signings that I had at another company, that was my signing, and I'm not there anymore. But I love when their press releases are going around, and I signed so and so. I'm like, well, of course you did, and it's fine. I mean, if this job was about the credit, I wouldn't do it because very rarely do your writer knows, the people that matter know. But,
Well, on a career level, it's important that people know, but even that eventually leaks out to the people in the inner circle of the industry. They know. I mean, we've all seen the classic scenario where, like, a 21-year-old scout at a label is like the lowest form of A&R life, and they hit the street every night, and they find an act that's absolutely undeniable. They bring it into the A&R manager, who's a notch above them. A&R manager walks down the hall and plays it for a director of A&R who's a notch above them to see what they think about it. So now if the director of A&R likes it, the A&R manager's feeling pretty good that they found it, even though it was the kid in the mailroom or something. And then the director of A&R plays it for the VP of A&R, and the VP of A&R has the director of A&R bring it into the weekly meeting and play it, and the VP of A&R acts like he or she found it, and the poor kid in the mailroom just has to eat it. It sucks.
what about me? Oh, that happens all the time. I've never let that happen.
You're spunky.
Well, even when things have been brought to me before, like I had an intern who is now, a senior vice president of A&R at a major label, but he was my intern when I worked at BMG, and he did some really good stuff. And I would say, I don't want to say his name, but so and so brought me this writer. I think this is amazing, and I went on to help him, get jobs, and so it's important, but it's true. It's not done enough. People want everybody, they take the credit, but he's doing well.
Great.
Eventually cream rises to the top.
So I have personally observed, once again, this is a Michael thing, maybe it's just me noticing this, but clearly song structures have changed over the years. It's been kind of a slow evolution, and now it appears to me that the big bombastic choruses that were such a thing, like people like Diane Warren, Carol Bear Sager, Kara, Dr. Luke, Esther Dean, they wrote songs, boom. I mean, you knew when that chorus hit you in the face and kicked you in the butt. And now I hear these choruses, they're kind of delicate. They're almost more of a refrain. The chorus is just a line that ends a thought, which was in the verse. I personally don't love it, although I still hear some songs that just are great, and they use that approach. Do you think that this is a permanent state of song form, or do you think it'll go back to the big bombastic chorus at some point?
It'll go back because it's not ever totally gone. I mean, I think it's almost like how, different genres become popular. Whether it was, we had rock and then it's pop, and then pop becomes a dirty word and it's alternative. And so no, I don't think that that'll ever completely go away. And, I definitely think some of those more alternative leaning artists can pull that off, and they're cool, but everybody wants a big ass hook they can sing back to. And whether it's a rock song or an alternative song or a pop song or an R&B song. So no, I mean, I certainly would never tell any of my writers, like, don't have a big chorus. I would never say that.
Right.
You don't have to have a pre-chorus necessarily. You can do like little things, but I don't think that's never going to go away.
It's funny how ear candy, which is largely the producer's job, has replaced the pre-chorus to some extent. And you and I are probably both equally brokenhearted. The bridges are not as prevalent as they used to be. I mean, nothing better than a great bridge. It just, brings it all home. I miss it.
It it's a moment in a song, and that's a lot of like what I tell my writers, and I think that's important in production, and that's important in songwriting. Is like those moments. I always feel like the bridge is like such a moment.
Yeah.
That so when there's not a bridge and it's just some like weird breakdown, the breakdown better be very cool. But yeah, I know I love me a bridge. So I think that song structure is still important. There are always going to be those ones that slip through and they're very cool and they'll do really well, but I don't think that's going to ever replace a big old hit.
I hope not. I love a big chorus. I do miss rock. It seems like rock is trying for a bit of a comeback right now, and I do love. I still don't know the difference. I can get it right 75% of the time. The difference between like indie pop and indie pop rock, the areas or the genres are so gray areas now. But I mean, like, I never would have picked 21 Pilots, and what they did was like, after you listen to the third 21 Pilots song, you go, wow, a lot of credit. They're doing something really different, and it is commercial, but it's not what you would classically think of as a hit-driven act. And I do love the fact people say, oh, there's nothing good on radio right now. Well, maybe you're listening to the wrong station. Spotify has a really wide range of interesting genres and fresh acts out there that old farts like us listen to and go, that's a hit.
Absolutely. And there's some like garbage on there too that I don't understand why it has like 5 billion streams, but 5 billion people liked it. So that's what's great about Spotify.
Don't you love it? Well, I don't know if you might have been the person on the other side of the desk, but back when I would work with like a local indie artist, I'd finish up a record with Neil Young or somebody and then promise somebody locally I would spend a month with them in the studio and put together a really good set of demos for them. And then I would take it to New York on my next trip, and I would go meet with like Stewie Fine or somebody, at a label, and they go, it's good, but here, this is what I just signed last week. And they play you something that just absolutely sucks, and you're sitting there thinking in your head, that stuff sucks, and you can't say anything.
Or they play your artist or your song on like volume 2,
right?
And then like, oh, let me play you mine, and then it's on like 8, 9, 10. The volume is so high, and I'm like, well, I mean, you can hear yours, you can hear mine.
Everything sounds great on 11.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so. This is a good question. You'll remember from your days at Taxi that a fair number of our members will submit music that you would listen to. You and I would have these discussions sitting right where I am at my desk right now with you on the other side. And we would talk about this song would have been a hit 15 years ago. Everything about it works, but it sounds dated. And people have a hard time kind of moving out of that era that they grew up loving music in. That's what they absorb. That's what they write. Can you recommend some current songs or songwriters that people should listen to, force feed themselves this new stuff so that they can become more current?
Well, I always honestly say, go listen to the, top 10 Billboard, Hot 100 or 20. New Music Friday. I look at a lot of New Music Friday is like completely garbage, but listen to the artists that are actually streaming really well and doing well. I think the only way you could stay current is if you hear what is currently out. And doing well, And I think look, in the same way that I don't get a lot of the music that's out, but I go to my kids and I'm like, is this cool? Like, do you like this? Or I say, what do you guys listen to? And sometimes I totally don't get it. But I also think, it's not a bad idea if you're not a young writer to collaborate with somebody who's a different generation than you are that can help sort of bring that to your session and make it more current, become more modern. That's a word that I hear all the time, like, it's supposed to be modern. So that's really what I would say is just to make yourself aware, listen to the radio. It's amazing how many songwriters don't even listen to the radio. I'm like, well, then how do you
Right.
know?
I hate what's out there today, so I don't listen. Well, you can't play golf on the tour if you don't know what the other guys are hitting.
Exactly. You can't do your job if you don't know, you know. So that's really important, is to be doing that's your research, and just spin through New Music Friday every Friday, go to the charts and see, and just, you can just verse chorus if you don't want to listen to the whole thing, just to get an idea.
Yeah.
Of what's going on.
Something you and I have both heard. I almost didn't put this question on the list, but we've heard it thousands of times, especially here at Taxi. Why didn't you guys forward my stuff? The screener said it was so close. Why didn't you forward it to the label or to the music supervisor or whomever the intended recipient would be? If it's so close, why didn't you send it to them? I know better than to send you stuff. We're good friends. I would never send you something and go, it's pretty close. What do you think? Because you're going to go like, Lasco, I love you, but you just wasted 5 minutes of my time. Why would anybody listen to it's pretty darn close?
Yeah, that's hard. I think also because, people have to remember I'm one of many pitching songs to these A&R people, or these managers, or these artists. So I personally have a lot of competition. So if I'm asking for 3 minutes and 20 seconds, or if I even get that far, just a verse, it can't just kind of be close. I think when you're an established writer and you have good bones of a song, then you can bring it to the A&R person and be like, hey, does Adam Levine want to jump on this? But until you get to that level, it can't really be close. And I know that a lot of screeners were very frustrated. Not screeners, a lot of members were very frustrated when I was there, because I would not forward too many things, but anything I ever forwarded, I got very high compliments on, because, and that's why A&R people listen to my songs when I pitch them. But Clive Davis was the one, when I first became a publisher at Rondor, I did that. I would send good songs. And back then, like, Arista had this, this scale. They would 1 to 7 or 1 to 8, I think it was. And if you had to get a 7.5 and above in order for it to go to club.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I just kept sending, oh, this is a good song. This is a good song. And there was somebody named Michael Barrickman and Keith Napoli, all those guys back then. And they called me and said, look, you're a good publisher. You have good ears, but we need you to be more selective in what you send to us. I don't want you to send us good songs. I want you to only, if it's great, send it. And that was like a ding, 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 ding. A lot of bells went off. And I said, well, that was such a valuable lesson that they took the time to teach me as a young publisher. And so I have never sent anything that was just good again. Now, I had some pretty smart writers and producers over the years that they send me a song that's good. And I say, hey, you know what? This is good, but it could be great. So why don't you go back in and rework that hook a little bit? The lyric over here is not so, and maybe beef up your track and let's make it great. Because just because a song is good doesn't mean it doesn't have the potential to be great. But I can't just pitch something good.
Going back to the golf analogy, the PGA Tour is not looking for golfers that are shooting the same scores as the guys in the top 10. They're looking for the golfers that'll shoot a better score than the guy who's the number one.
Exactly. I'm trying to get this shadow off my face. I'm sorry. I must have come here.
What? Oh, the sunlight. Well, look at this. You're getting a tan while you're being interviewed. All right, I'm going to save my last question for a little bit from now. By the way, I want to mention that I saw somewhere reading about you or your dad that your dad actually is on a list that Billboard has of the top 100 producers in the industry. And I got to say, even I got a little bit of a, I can't say that I burst into tears, but, I love your dad. He's a cool guy. And it's like, wow, That's a really
I
cool thing.
was grateful to my father because um, he was the best teacher, that I ever had, really.
Yep.
Yeah.
Tough but loving.
Tough, yeah. Tough but loving. Right.
All right. We've got 10 minutes left. Let's take a couple questions. Here's one from Nancy Kalel. She says, Ms. Torchia, would you please define ear candy?
Like, how when you eat candy, it's really sweet and makes you feel good.
Yeah.
I don't know how to. It's just like you're like, woo, that sounded really good. I don't know. Ear candy could be it could be an ad lib, it could be a harmony, it could be a bass line. Like, I don't know. I mean, it could just be like a bridge that you just weren't expecting. So, I think ear candy is back to like just those moments that make me like,
Yeah.
oh, that sounds good.
Anything that catches your ear in a way that elevates the song.
Exactly.
And, it could be a production lick, or it could be the way the vocalist just bends a note to go up to the next octave or something.
That's really what gets me, is when, even like sometimes in like the second or third chorus, like they just like change the melody in a line,
Yeah.
You're like, I love that. You just have to make it special, just, you have to take listeners on a journey. Anything that truly, most anything I've ever signed is because I felt something, Of course, there are those signings that as a publisher you come across where you're like, well, they have, about 25 incoming, cuts coming in. So this is a good business decision.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't do that so often. For me, it's like, if you like move me in some way, it's almost like when I heard The Attire, when I heard Greg and Steven, I heard those melodies and I just, something like moved through my soul. I mean, I went like ballistic. They were in long form at Sony. LA Reid was signing them over here. And I was like, I have to have them.
Wow.
Yeah, because it moved me in such a way. So I think that's really kind of what ear candy is. It moves you,
I don't remember ever seeing you so excited about anybody as you are about those guys. So I'm really glad that you found them. It's like a new love, It's like,
no, it's true.
Yeah.
It's been a long labor of love, but it's worth it because truly anybody that has heard them has been like, holy shit. But still, it's taken a while because even though someone thinks they're great, but they're like, oh, but their socials aren't this, or they don't have, So it's back to that where it's been just a lot of really building and building and building and marketing and even with the guys having a deal. I mean, they're shooting socials every single day. They're writing every single day. Nobody's taking a break.
Yeah.
Because of the deal,
Yeah, they always say, in quotes, always say the hard work begins when you sign the deal.
Oh, yeah. And that's when like any insecurity actually comes up is once you sign that deal. Because, now you've got people who are giving you money and, expecting, so that's like a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
That's a lot of times when you weed out who's got it and who doesn't is when they have that kind of pressure and they still, can function and and overcome and continue writing hits and look at. So not every song is going to be a hit, but you have to then write another one. That's what I say.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's always another one. And it probably will be better than last because you're more experienced than you were when you wrote that one.
Exactly.
Somebody just asked a question. Do you suggest that an artist start a publishing company? And if so, what are the benefits? I just want to say Andrea's more of a creative person, not necessarily a business person, although she certainly knows the industry like the back of her hand. So I don't know if that's a question you even want to take.
It depends. I mean, if you're an independent artist and you're new and you don't have any, pipeline or I don't think it's really necessary. I think that I think it's, it's smart to make sure that you're affiliated and that you have a publishing designate, because until you sign a publishing company, you sort of own your own publishing.
Right.
I know there's a lot of I think Diane Warren sort of always kept her own publishing, and she just did like an admin deal. But I don't know. I don't think it's necessary. I think as you continue on in your career, you could, if you wanted to, or just have a company administer you. But I don't know. I don't think that that's like the top thing to be thinking about.
I agree. Especially when you don't have any leverage. It's like, you almost have to take the deal that's presented to you in the beginning, unless you're that one in literally a million that writes a song that's so good that people will fall on a sword to get it. I know everybody thinks their song is that good, but, I've been in the industry for over 40 years, and I've only seen that happen like twice, maybe. Christoph Scott wants to know if you can be here every Monday.
I don't think Michael will want me here every Monday. But
I would, actually. I love hanging out with you. Andrea and I hadn't seen each other in years, and we got together for a brunch about, I don't know, 6 or 8 weeks ago or something. And it was literally like we saw each other at work yesterday. I mean, we've always been very comfortable.
Yeah. Do that again.
And I can't believe your kids are so grown up. I mean, I know. It's like, boom, goes like that, doesn't it?
We had an agreement they weren't supposed to grow up past 5 and 7, and nobody's listening.
Yeah, I know. We've got a 5-year-old granddaughter and a 5-year-old grandson, and it's just like, I can remember when they were squirmy little babies coming home from the hospital, and now they're like going off to school with a little backpack and cute sneakers. It just goes by so fast.
My daughter just got her driver's license, so everybody, I can't tell you where I live, but be careful.
Yeah. I know your exit, and I take that one sometimes.
Carefully out there.
Let's see. I'm trying to see if there's one more question. We've got 3 minutes left. Paul Anthony Land wants to know if you have a social media account that he can follow you on. Stalker.
I'm really so boring. I really just post about my kids and work stuff, but yeah, I think I'm Andrea Torchia. You can find me on Instagram.
There you go.
Yeah.
Pictures of the kids and the puppies. Question, Michael, can you please thank Miss Torchia for deciding to come on Taxi? Thank you, Andrea. Yeah, I'm telling you, Andrea's she's my female Rob Shirelli. We could literally just hang out and talk endlessly, and it would interesting to us at least. Any predictions for genres or styles or anything we should look for coming down the pike as far as new music?
I think things are gonna continue being a little more whatever this indie pop, but I do think pop is making its comeback. I think people are getting a little tired of the 4-minute songs with no chorus. I think what's great is there is so much diversity, and because people can release their music independently, that there's always going to be a wide variety to choose from. I think the female singer-songwriter, the male singer-songwriter, I just think lyric and melody, everybody, melodies, melody is where it captures people's hearts, truly. So I don't know that I think there's going to be a particular genre. I know rock is trying to make a comeback. I know rap is not going away. Urban music is super big. But I just think, a great song will always, make it great.
Somebody just called you a rock star guest. Just like Robin Frederick. Yeah, Robin loves you. Robin was so happy. I don't know if I ever told you this, but when I hired you to come to work here, Robin was delighted that you were coming here. So anyway, a couple people have asked if you'll be joining us for the road rally. So I'm going to publicly say she's certainly invited. I would, any excuse to hang out with Andrea is a good excuse as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah, try and keep your...
like to do this, so I survived. So yes, I would do that.
You didn't only survive, you did great. I mean, seriously, I think you imparted a lot of very authentic wisdom, you know. I mean, I know you are not somebody to put on airs and not sling the BS like some people in our industry do, and that's why I was glad that you said yes. So thank you. You were a great guest. I will reach out to you. Please hold the weekend of November 5th, 6th, and 7th for the Road Rally. And you guys in the audience, I want to let you know, I am not doing a quarantini happy hour tomorrow because I really need the time to work on the Road Rally. I will be back on Thursday at 4 o'clock right here, same channel. If you like today's show, please give us a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, hit that red button. Andrea, I adore you. Thank you so much for doing this. It was great.
Keep writing. Don't give up. Believe in yourself. Work hard.
Thanks, Andrea. Say hi to the kids.
I will.